My name is Angel Smith, the DAV NSO supervisor out of the Phoenix, Arizona office. I want to introduce to you Ms. Delphine Metcalf Foster. Miss Metcalf Foster, can you just describe who you are?
Okay, I'm Delphine Metcalf Foster, a native of Vallejo, California, retired United States Army First Sergeant, and past National Commander for the Disabled American Veterans and past Department Commander for the state of California.
Okay. So, what made you want to join the military?
Well, it was a couple things. First of all, my dad was in the Spanish American War, and when I was a little girl, I used to sit on his lap and see all these little pictures of him and horses, and I wanted to ride a horse. So, of course, I wanted to go in the army like he did. But of course, as years went on, I knew that was impossible to ride that horse. But wasn't until the early 70s that I was working at the Letterman Army Medical Center at the Presidio of San Francisco. I met a major white. She was my supervisor. And one day she came up on the ward where I was working. I was a licensed vocational nurse and asked me to come down to her office. I went down to her office and she had U.S. Army pamphlets on her desk. And she said, well, Delphine, the reason I called you down here, she said, we've been noticing you in our union meetings. Well, at the time, I was the president of the union. And she said, you're a born leader. And I just mentioned to her, I said, oh, well, Major White, because I talk too much? And she just fell out laughing. And she said, no, but we've all been talking. You know, they have a myth about women going in the military. Have you ever heard about that? And I looked at her and oh no, what do you mean a myth? And she said, most of the time the women go in the military because they want to find a husband. They're trying to get away from home. They want to go to college. But with their background, and I do know it, you have all of that. And you could bring something to the military. And I looked at her, I said, really? And I got a little angry because when she said that this is what they thought about women in the military, it kind of made my antennas go up. It was like a challenge.
Hmm.
Also, I thought about that and I thought about my wish with my dad. So I told her, I said, huh. She said, but now let me just say this. You're in your 30s. You don't have long to go. I think about 4 months, you have to make up your mind, would you want to go to the military before then? And it would just be in the reserves.
Hmm.
So I thought about it and I went home and told my husband and what have you. And I told him, I said, I just don't like this saying what women can't do. And I remember his smile. He said, oh boy, there's a challenge for someone, isn't it? And I said, why can't we do this? And so those are the two people that really encouraged me to go.
Right. And so when she talked about you don't have much time, so at that time you were in your 30s,
Right,
and you and your daughter were in the
right.
military at the same time. How did that go?
Well, she lasted 2 weeks and I lasted 21 years, bottom
Okay.
line.
Okay. Okay.
And she hates for me to say that, but as I tell her, it wasn't for her at the time. But I'm happy to say that her daughter went in the army and she's an Afghanistan veteran. And now my great granddaughter is in the army and she's up at Fort Lewis, Washington. So as I told her, sometimes it's not for everyone, but the lineage is there that we're still in the army family.
Right. Right.
Yes.
And you just learned that your great granddaughter has the same MOS.
Oh, yes. I have to tell you that little story. I went to her graduation at Fort Sam, Houston, Texas, a couple months ago, and I was mentioning to her well, it hasn't changed. And she looked at, said, Great grandma, what do you mean it hasn't changed? And I never have told her where I went. She never asked me about the Army. She used to volunteer with me as a teenager at the VA medical center, and she talked to a lot of these, comrades there. But she never asked me what I did in the military. And I says, well, I was here, 45 plus years ago. And she looked at me, she says, oh, great grandmother, you wasn't here. I said, well, let's go to the library. Let's go to the library. So, of course, everybody that's went to Fort Sam pictures there. But not only she's there going to school there, she's taking the same MOS that I took 45 years plus ago as a combat medic.
Uh-huh.
And that just blew everybody away. When I talked to her first sergeant, they said, "You have to be kidding." So as I told my daughter, maybe she didn't make it, but it's still going in our family.
There
And
were
we're
other things for her to do.
for to do, yes. Yes.
And you served in Desert Storm.
Yes, I served in Desert Storm 1999, 91.
What type of barriers did you have to overcome while you were there as a female soldier? And you were first sergeant at the time, right?
Yeah, I was the first sergeant. I was very fortunate not to have many barriers. I'll give you an incident about my company. My company was a grade registration company. I had 38 members and only 4 females. They were very respectful. We knew each other, and so there was no problem. And one little instance I have to tell you about, I had sent 3 of my soldiers over to the next company to get some supplies.
Hmm.
And they came back and they said, "Oh, Top, well, that's what you call first sergeant. You
Right.
know, these guys across the way, they can't believe that we're over here with a woman." They said, "You're over there with a female, a woman?" And they're just laughing. And we said, "We wouldn't have came over here with anybody else. We're reserves. We could have not come, but we knew she was take care of us because she did not belong to the good old boys club."
Hmm.
And I said, "Wow, you guys said that?" I said, "Oh, yes." So I said, "But I think I'll go over to the company and just introduce myself to them, since they don't believe that, females can run a company, or especially in a time of uncertainties as this is." So I went over and they were playing in these boom boxes. It was on a Saturday, and and they saw me coming, and all of a sudden, they stood up straight. "Oh, hi, First Sergeant Howard." And I said, "How are you guys?" And we had a great conversation. Um, and I said, "I understand that you don't think that women can run companies as a first sergeant, huh?" "Well, we didn't mean," and I said, "No, no, no. I just want, to make sure you guys understand. I think I'm qualified." And they just was so, "Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am." I said, "No, you don't have to say that." They were just like blown away, first of all, because I approached them.
Uh-huh.
And I
Right.
did not approach them in a way that, "I'm going to get you in trouble." I approached them to let them know, here I am. I don't have to hide.
Right.
I'm very qualified to do my job and what have you. And so that really was the only, stickler. It wasn't a stickler. It was just eye-opening to these young men that it could happen, you know. And so we became very good friends. So that it really was about the only thing, because everybody was very respectful,
Uh-huh.
and they knew I knew my job. And when I got injured and had to go to long school in Germany, I remember my CEO asked me, "Well, who do you want to run your company, Top, until you come back, or if you come back?" And I'll never forget, I told him a E5. And he looked at me and he says, "Well, you have these E6s and E7s in the company. That's going to be some problems." I said, "You asked me, who do I know that can take this and run with it?"
Hmm.
And he did, of course. I, you know, assigned it to him. But it just, to me, goes to show you, and here go back on the female type too. People don't think women can run things, and sometimes they don't think people of a certain rank or can run things, but it can happen, and it did happen.
Right.
Hmm.
Now, with your legacy with the disabled American veterans,
Hmm.
you were the first female, actually the only female in 102 years
Yeah.
of
You
the
got to make me
organization.
old. Okay, come on.
Which is the largest veteran service organization there is in the
Yeah.
country. Um, I know you've held many positions with DAV and with the female veterans side of
Advisory
the
board.
VA,
Hmm.
correct.
Hmm.
So were there any barriers you had to overcome? Or I know that there is tons of respect for you with VA and DAV. So how did you go through the ranks with the organization?
Well, as I say, I became Department of California's commander, first female also. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the only barrier, and it just was in California, it was not national. National, it was just beautiful people, and everybody worked together, and I just loved the, camaraderie that we had. But I'll never forget when I was going up for commander for the state of California. My mentor at the time, and he's passed away now, but he told me, he says, uh, Delphine, I want you to give me your DD-214. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. He said, I'm on the board, nominating board. And there's a couple of people on this board that said a woman will never run the state. And he said, but see, they don't know you, and they don't know what I know is on that DD-214 either.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And I need it because when I go before that board, if I have any questions, I'm going to present it to them. And I said, well, I kind of like got, wait a minute. I thought about Major White telling me females, aren't qualified, but just for school and all these things. So I'm thinking, so I have to show my paperwork to a nominating board because I'm a female? And I got a little angry with he says, please don't get angry with me. It's not me. He said, it's just these two people. And so I did. And
Mm-hmm.
he laughed after everything was over. He said, when they saw your DD-214, and I saw their faces, and the only thing I asked them, can you tell me any of the gentlemen that went up for this position that have any type of record that she does, including her Bronze Star? And he said their face were like, oh no. So
Mm-hmm.
that is the only kind of barrier I had, going up. It was just like, okay, so I had to prove myself. I have to show you my paperwork that I can do X, Y, Z.
You have the support as
Yes.
well.
And then afterward, they were my mentors.
Right.
After this whole thing was over, and I suggested to them this talk, and we did. They
Mm-hmm.
became mentors of me. We all worked together.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Before we get on to the most recent activity, let's talk about your dad.
Oh, my dad. Yes, like I said, he
Your
was a
face
Spanish
lit
War,
up,
American War.
and
Uh,
your face just lit up.
I know. Ninth Cavalry, All Black Cavalry. Uh, I understand. And he went in, most people went in, especially the Black individuals, when they were 16. He changed his age, said that he was 18 because they could not get a jobs in Alabama and some of the South. But my dad was a strong role model to me. Matter of fact, and when I became, well, was the Department Commander of California, I ran to a high school friend that I knew, and she is now the historian of Vallejo. And she had asked me, she said, Delphine, she made a statement. She said, Delphine, you're just like your father. And I'm thinking, how does she know? My father passed when I was 5 years old. How did she know my father? And I says, what do you mean just like my father? She said, you're a fighter. She says, I'm the historian. And she said, you didn't read a paper about your father? I said, no, I haven't. She said, I want you to go to the library and I want you to get the 1937 Vallejo paper. And I'm like, oh, and here I am at night. I'm like, oh my God, something I don't know about him and she knows, Long story short, my father and another gentleman sued the county to let colored troops, as they said at the time, into the Veterans Building here in Vallejo, which is the first Veterans Building that I went to have my first DAV meeting, and the rest is history.
And you didn't know that at the time.
Oh no, I had no clue. I just knew it was in the Spanish American War. He got out of the military, the same place that I did at the Presidio of San Francisco. He did all of those things that, we did together per se, but I had no idea he was such an advocate for veterans. And she said, when I called her later, she said, that's why I told you, you are just like your father. You're an advocate for veterans. And that puts a spark in my mind too about continuing, helping veterans along the
Is,
way.
is, is
Yeah.
this the same facility? Because we're going to get onto the naming the Merritt Island Veteran Affairs Clinic.
Oh, well, let me tell you that story.
Made me silly. Now your dad worked at that facility.
Yes, well, when he got out of the military at the Presidio San Francisco, he came to Vallejo. And at the time, of course, you know, especially black soldiers, they could not get any jobs but cooking and washing dishes. So he was a cook there at Merritt Island until he retired. And when he became ill at home, the ambulance, where did they take him? To Merritt Island Hospital Clinic, the same clinic that they want me to be named after. And that's just blowing my mind when that happened. You know, I'm thinking I dedicate it to all our veterans. Don't get me wrong, of that clinic. If I become, you know, have that name, uh, dispensary named after me, but on a personal matter, I think about him and what he had to go through for me and other veterans uh, to to get that happen,
Right.
to have that happen. So, yeah, it's just going to be an honor, like I said, if it happened. But even if it doesn't happen, it's an honor to be thought of in that way, and that would be his legacy also, I think.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And with that, with closing, what would you like for your legacy to be?
You know, I've never thought of it that way, but I think I would like for it to be that a impossibility is always a possibility.
And you ran across that throughout your years.
Yes,
Individuals thought it was impossible
it's
for you.
possible. And it became possible.
Very possible.
Yes.
We appreciate you being here for this year's 2023 Black History Month. Thank you. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to share your story.
Sure. Well, I appreciate everything you guys are doing for our veterans. You're doing a great job. And just keep up the good work and keep us all in your prayers.
Most definitely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.